Ricky Sherbert Underground. After a month off, now back to infect the airwaves with their unique fantasy baseball enlightenment on RotoRob Fantasy Baseball Weekly podcast, heard every Thursday evening at 9 p.m. EST on Blog Talk Radio. We're into mid-March now, which means we're now just 3.5 weeks away from the start of the 2015 MLB regular season. This week, A-Rod showed he can still knock the ball out of the park. Yu Darvish wants one more opinion before undergoing Tommy John surgery and crushing many an owner's dreams. And Chris Sale will not make his start on opening day in the wake of his foot injury. We're going to cover some of these stories and many more over the next 50 minutes or so pull up a beanbag chair and get comfy. I'm RotoRob, and my guest this week is Peter Kreutzer, a.k.a. RotoMan, who runs both the fantasy baseball and football guides we contribute to, but also oversees AskRotoMan.com. How are you this evening, Peter?
Very good, Rob. I'm very good. It's a little frightening moment right before I phoned in, where the internet went down, and I couldn't find the number which was in my Google Calendar was inaccessible. But fortunately, I have that little cell phone thing that mirrored it, and I got on the air.
Good thinking. Nothing. I mean, I'm like a chicken with no head when there's no internet. I don't even know what to do. But I'll tell you, I'm doing better this evening than Marcus Stroman, who has suffered a torn ACL and will miss the entire season, a devastating blow for the Toronto Blue Jays. Now, I want to remind you the chat room and phone lines are open. Guests, feel free to call in at 347-826-7358. And I guess you won't be joining me in the chat room, Peter, because you don't have internet access.
I don't, although we're rebooting the system, and maybe I'll end up with it. I don't know.
Okay, cool. Just going to quickly run down what's going on over at the site, and then we'll get into the news of the week. Over on RotoRob.com on the baseball side of things, today we had an article scouting the USC Trojans, as we did on Wednesday and Tuesday, carrying on a series of articles we began last week. On Monday, the 2015 RotoRob draft kit continued as we unveiled our top 100 relief pitcher rankings. And our top 55 catcher rankings are now complete. We just have to write some profiles, and we'll get that posted soon. Also, just a reminder, as we were alluding to earlier, the 2015 Fantasy Baseball Guide is out. We're offering a promo that will entitle you to a $1 savings if you buy it online. Just use promo code ROB15. Football. Things are quiet lately, but watch for some off-season content coming soon. On the hockey front, every Sunday we have the Wire Troll written by NHL editor Dakota Case, this week highlighting Chris Russell. Basketball, we have the Wire Troll every Saturday written by NBA editor McCade Pearson. This week we highlighted Jason Richardson, and that's a name fantasy owners have not heard for some time. On the video game side of things, nothing new this week, but new games are being added constantly, so check back soon. We are now just 5 articles away from reaching 4,050 posts in the site's history. So that next week. Also, do not follow RotoRob on Storify. We just hit the 25 follower mark, so come and join the party. Have you checked out Storify yet, Peter?
I've heard of it. I don't know Storify though. No, what's happening there?
It's one of these new social media sites. It's not that new, actually, anymore. It's about 3 or 4 years old. So that's like ancient in social media circles. But it's pretty cool, actually. You kind of curate content on it, and it allows you to drag in links from like Facebook and from Google and like Google News and pictures, and basically create your own story by dragging things in and then maybe adding a comment, like curating, essentially a little commentary about what you've created. It's really cool and really user-friendly. It's very easy to use, and it's kind of fun. It's an interesting way to kind of create a story without actually writing something. You know what I mean?
I'll check that out.
Yeah, it's all right. I'm surprised it hasn't picked up more steam, to be honest with you. I find it very user-friendly, and actually for those who like curating content. All right. Let's talk some baseball. Our top story this week is regarding the New York Mets bullpen, which suffered another potential major blow when Josh Edgin their lefty specialist, and really their only lefty in the bullpen with any real experience, had to go for an MRI on his pitching elbow, and the news is not good. Tell us more, Peter.
Well, I don't. I think it's a little up in the air yet at this point. He's got a sprained ligament in his elbow, which immediately makes you say time to go to the doctor. But it seems like it's still up in the air as to whether he's really going to need surgery or if rest and rehab is going to do it. He's going to miss. He's going to miss a few weeks at least, and every moment of that could lead to the bad news. But right now it's a little bit up in the air.
Right. I'm not sure it's actually a sprain. They're calling it, but my understanding based on the MRI was that the ligament has been stretched or loose. Basically, it's been elongated. And the funny thing is, the same thing happened to him in August. Late August, he was out for a while with some elbow discomfort, which should have been a warning signal to the Mets, and I'll get into that a little later, that this could be a problem. I mean, because this is a guy that's sort of been off the fantasy radar so far, but it's hard not to be impressed with what he did last year when he went 1-0 with a 1.32 ERA and walked only 6 batters in 27 and a third. Now, he had a pretty low BABIP, so that suggests his ERA was definitely unsustainable. But now, of course, as you suggested, he's in a holding pattern. They're going to try rest and rehab for 2 or 3 weeks to see if his elbow responds, or Tommy John surgery. Now, they figure if he still has that, if it's still a problem 3 weeks from now, and he has the Tommy John surgery, like a worst case scenario, he'll be available for opening day in the 16th, so that won't necessarily affect his, ability to be ready for next year. So they basically want to wait a maximum of 3 weeks and then decide one way or the other. Okay, you're pitching through this pain or not. Because the problem, I believe, is there's a pre-existing bone spur that is causing the pain and discomfort. And because rest is not going to fix the elongated ligament no matter how long, but there's no reason he can't continue to pitch his entire career without surgery if his elbow is not, if the uncomfort level ceases to be a problem, and if his elbow's comfortable. So the team apparently is going to leave it up to Edson to decide how he wants to proceed. So stay tuned, I guess. Now, here's the question for you, Peter. As I mentioned, in late August, he missed a couple weeks with elbow discomfort. This isn't the first time this issue cropped up. And apparently the MRI that was taken then is identical, essentially, to the one they took this week. The team never considered surgery back then, but he really was the only, they decided left-handed relieving was a weakness, but they opted to just let it slide. They didn't do a damn thing about it. Now, what were the Mets thinking here? I mean, they kind of put themselves behind the 8 ball here, didn't they?
I guess it does seem like they're understaffed with lefties, but there are a lot of lefties out there. There's a lot of lefty specialists who are always floating around. I don't know. They've done an okay job of putting together a team for this year.
Yeah.
Making use of the trades and making use of the draft picks and putting together prospects who are growing into a real pitching staff. It's a funny looking offense right now, but funny looking offenses have won in the past if Lucas Duda is for real and David Wright stays healthy. There's a little bit of pop there. So it's a funny thing, but I think in terms of fungible players, Edgen, as good as he was last year in his couple of months, isn't a key part of that team. He's replaceable at this point.
Well, the question is by who? I mean, I looked at the candidates there in Major League Camp, and no one's really jumping out at me. You got Rule 5 pick Sean Gilmartin. You got Scott Rice, who has some Major League experience, but is coming back from an injury, I believe, his own. You got Dario Alvarez and Jack Leathersich. Any of those names jumping out at you? Gold?
No, but a year ago, Josh Etchen wasn't jumping out at me either.
Fair enough.
Those guys are
fair enough.
He pitched better than he is last year, but the Mets system is playing their games in Las Vegas. It's so funny what those pitchers look terrible, and then they get to an actual place where the environment is a little bit normal, and they can look a lot better than they do out there. So I wouldn't be too freaked about it. They weren't relying on him. They're understaffed from the left side, and they'll find a guy to take his place if he's going to miss a protracted period of time. But you're right about the overstretched ligament is a different situation than a sprain. It's more like ligament stretches and until it breaks or tears, and that was causing inflammation issues in the elbow more than a sprain situation with swelling. That was more the problem.
Of course, it would be fixed the same way as an elbow tear would be, and Tommy John surgery would repair that.
Well, to make it not overstretched, yes, that's
right. Yeah, I mean, but like I said, I think really it's that bone spur that's really causing the problem here. I understand as well the team's considering bringing in someone from the minor league camp. They signed Dwayne Bello, who used to be with the Tigers and once with the Marlins. That's one option, and so is Darren Gorski. They do have a great left-handed pitching prospect in Steven Matz, but they say they will not use him in relief, so that's probably a wise decision. But like I said, Edgkin had a very good year. He earned 5 holds to match his career high lefties, 185 BAA. 80s to a 219 mark as well, which makes me wonder whether he was being kind of underutilized a bit, considering the Mets bullpen was kind of a wasteland last year. I mean, if this guy can get righties out as well, I don't really understand why they weren't using him a little bit more against righties. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, he wasn't up all that long, so it wasn't. I don't know that we know exactly, and he was hurt for part of the time he was up. So,
he pitched 47 games, so I assume he was around for at least half the season. Of course, more than half the year. 47 games. You figure that's about 3 months worth, right?
Yeah, well, that's a good point. He 27 innings in 47 games. That's like a lefty specialist, but he did face 35 righties, so he wasn't totally a one batter pitcher.
Someone did Axis is back.
What's that?
Access is back. Is your internet access? Oh, I said I think someone's internet access is back.
Oh yeah, no, I have all this stuff memorized.
Wow, I knew there was a reason why I had you on the show. So the Mets had a chance to get, of course, the big lefties on the market this winter were Andrew Miller and Zach Duke. But the Mets felt both of them were too costly. Fair enough. They both got huge-ass contracts. But they also knew that Edgkin's elbow could be an issue based on his problems in August, and they opted to do nothing. I took a look at the remaining free agents, Peter. The only one still out there is Sean Burnett as a left-handed reliever. I mean, as far as I know, he's the only one available. I don't know whether they're going to engage in talks with him. But like you were alluding to, the Mets they kind of feel they can compete this year, and I think this punches a hole in that. But we shall see.
Yeah, I would just say Burnett is a good lefty. He had Tommy John last June, so he's not doesn't appear. Relievers have a shorter rehab time than starters do generally, as do position players. So, but he's not going to be the solution anytime right off the bat. But my point before was just that there are a lot of lefties out there who are in camps right now or NRIs, and some of them are going to get cut, and the Mets are going to be able to pick up a guy who can get lefties out. I don't think there's any, or can give the appearance that he'll be able to get lefties out, and we'll see. But I don't think it's an immediate crisis. But obviously, they have to pay some attention to it.
Yeah, we'll see how things play out during the season if this becomes a matchup issue. I mean, first of all, the Mets are in contention at all. I mean, if they're not in contention, it really doesn't matter 2 hoots anyhow, right? But I mean, if they're really going to make a run for it and they're in contention, we'll see how it plays out against some of the, the tougher left-handed hitters in the East.
it's going to take some good pitching for them to keep up with certainly with the Nationals and to play against the Marlins. They're going to have to get a lot of really good pitching, and they may have it. That's the surprising and kind of cool thing about that team.
Yeah, I still have questions about the bullpen and as a whole. I mean, right now the closer, I guess, is Mejia, but that's still sort of undecided. Bobby Parnell's still in the mix. Last year was, like I said, a wasteland. The relievers they were going through was just crazy. It will be interesting to see, to me, if that has been improved at all this year, because I think that was a massive weak spot. And again, on a weak team, who cares? But if they're in contention, a weak bullpen is going to kind of stick out like a sore thumb, especially with all that young pitching out, because you really don't want those young starters going 8 innings every time out, right? You got to kind of, you're not going to, I assume they're going to kind of treat Matt Harvey with some kid gloves for a while. They're not going to want him pitching complete games, right? And to keep your arm for the long haul.
They say there's no innings cap for him, but it's been like 16, 17 months since he's had the surgery, but they're not going to run his pitch counts up, I'm sure. That would be crazy.
Of course. Well, speaking of the NL East, more bad news on the pitching front. Cliff Lee, elbow problems that began really in May of last year. He had to shut it down for a while. He came back, tried to pitch through elbow pain, and it's the same story. They shut it down for the year, and, now he's had a whole off season off. He's back now, and bang, the elbow pain has reoccurred for Cliff Lee, and now it has massive ramifications on a number of fronts. First of all, the Phillies rebuilding program. Second of all, Cliff Lee's career, which, in the quotes I've read, he's sounding pretty resigned to the idea that if this is it, this is it. What are you hearing along those lines, Peter?
Oh, I think this is really could be the end. It's he's trying to pitch through it, and it's not getting better, and it's hard to see how this resolves well. If he goes into some kind of surgery, it's another year. He becomes like a 38-year-old guy. When you talk about him saying he's resigned, I think he's not the kind of guy who's going to try and come back at 40, or he's going to be. He might have the surgery just to get normal use, or to be able to have snowball fights with his kids or whatever. But it's not. This could easily be the end of the line.
So 90-mile-an-hour snowballs at his kids, as opposed to lobbing 50-mile-an-hour pitches.
I was thinking more of the 150-yard toss more than the velocity. But
but I mean, Lee's not a pitcher who ever has dominated based on his heater. Like, really, it's all been about command for him. In fact, he really wasn't that good a pitcher earlier in his career until all of a sudden it clicked in that, his command became seriously dominant. And then he really took off as a force. So it stands to reason. It's not like, Nolan Ryan invent himself later in his career, like a fastball pitcher is just going to blow you away, or like how Roger Clemens necessarily had to reinvent himself, something like that. Pitcher's just going to rely on his heater consistently. I mean, obviously, Lee's had a pretty decent fastball, but it was all about where he placed it, right?
Yep.
So to me, a pitcher like that, he's like a crafty lefty more than more than a righty. So I could see a pitcher like that pitching forever almost.
Maybe I was thinking of it more in terms of the will to persevere through the late 30s. You have surgery, the rehab is intense and hard, and the chances of making it are, dwindling. And maybe no comment on Cliff Lee and his desire to pitch in the major leagues. That just strikes me as because I don't know. I mean, maybe he is feeling that way, but. To me, it seems like at some point you just say maybe it's time to quit it. And he's not a flamethrower, but he's still a 90-mile-an-hour guy. And you're absolutely right. When he figured out how to throw strikes and get guys out, that made all the difference. But it and made him very, very good.
But you're right as well in that it doesn't sound like he has the fire to pitch forever. I mean, just reading the articles, hearing what he's saying, I'm hearing resignation in his voice that he does not feel like he's talking about, I have no regrets, my career, like he's talking about his career as a whole, not in the past tense, but you get that sense that he is thinking about this, and he's thinking, well, enough's enough. I've had a really good run. But here's a bigger question, Peter. Did the Phillies royally screw up by not moving Lee when they could? Say 2-3 years ago, when everyone knew in baseball the Phillies should be rebuilding, but the Phillies themselves couldn't wrap their heads around the idea that they should have been in rebuilding mode until at least a year later. And they had their chance to move Lee. And now, what if Hamels gets hurt? I mean, I read this really interesting column on ESPN of Jason Stark interviewed tomorrow, who doesn't seem to understand I wonder if he's the right man to guide this rebuilding program based on what he's saying. Stark was asking him, given what's happened in the league, are you taking a lesson from that as far as Hamels goes? Because, Hamels been on the market for like a year and a half now or whatever, but Amaro was sticking to his guns in terms of wanting this massive A-plus package, and he won't budge unless he gets it. And it's like, is this injury going to make him rethink that at all and think, gee, do I want to get stuck with Lee? Because let's face it, if Lee undergoes surgery, he's never going to pitch for the Phillies again. This is the final year of his contract. Hamels could get hurt too. It could happen. Should they move him? Should they move him when they can? Like, I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm saying the Phillies, I think, are really screwing up here.
I would say that Ruben Amaro is not the most rational of general managers, and anything he does is not. It's not always crazy. It's not always wrong, but he makes many odd and funny decisions, and it's one of the reasons why the Phillies, who just a few years ago looked to be a juggernaut forever, are all of a sudden, well, if it wasn't for the Braves, they would probably be the worst team in baseball, and maybe they may even be worse than the Braves. So
they could.
So it's the funny thing is that Amaro has kept his job for so long, but they were a good team for a while, and that buys a little breathing room. I don't see it lasting for much longer. Certainly, they could have handled all the situations better and done a more forward-thinking approach and been more realistic about what Hamels could draw. The things they were looking for were way out of line with what the current market is. And one of the interesting things about the marketplace today is that there's so many statistics and there's so many numbers and there's so many commentators and there's so many people looking at every one of these deals and figuring out based on projections and our scouts evaluations and from Zips projections that go 6 years into the future. It's become, and it's started to look like a very, very rational system. And Ruben Amaro stands outside of that rational system. He doesn't make decisions based that way. And these are both cases where maybe he should have, and they'd be better off.
Yeah. I'm speaking as a Phillies fan here, so I'm not slagging the Phillies, but I am definitely slagging Ruben Amaro and wondering, as a general manager, given the difficulty he has shown in assessing his own team, like a realistic portrayal of his own team, that to me right there is number one problem. Like, if you can't even figure out where your own team is in the scope of its growth or development curve, we've got a problem. I mean, you could date it back to the Phillies. I mean, because that money could have been they had so many internal options to close, and spend that kind of money on a long-term deal for a closer when they needed desperately a third baseman. They could have got Aramis Ramirez fairly, cheap, or even, a better third baseman at the time, which is what they really needed, or a multitude of other things that they could have used that money on better. And then, of course, the Ryan Howard extension was really the death knell. But those two things really, to me, killed the Phillies because they were still dealing as if they were in that dynasty mode from winning the World Series, and that they, like you talked about, had built a team that was going to, sustain itself over a course of 5-7 years, like a window of contention.
Right.
When in fact the window was already closing. And yeah, Amara was not the kind of guy I see leading a rebuilding program the way like someone like a Pat Gillick would be, or something like that, And it's just, I don't get it.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. It's and I don't know. There's funny politics with the Phillies, so he could stay forever, or he could be. He could not. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
He was certainly being groomed for the job for long enough, and then finally took it over. So who knows? I really hope, as a Phillies fan, that they come to their senses soon, because they've taken a really good organization and turned it into a real mess. And as far as Lee goes, he threw a bullpen session yesterday, and there was no improvement in the elbow pain. Basically, at this point right now, he's just hoping the pain goes away. He has a tear in his flexor tendon, needs surgery that will knock about 6 to 8 months. It's not as bad as Tommy John surgery, but if he keeps trying to pitch through the pain, his UCL could be damaged. That could lead to Tommy John surgery. But it sounds really clear that he does not want to undergo surgery and would almost rather retire than do so at this point. And we saw what happened when he tried to pitch the pain last year. Corner worst through BAA. 3.65 ERA, awful, but it was his highest since 2007. Had a losing record, but that's not a surprise being that he pitched for the Phillies. His K-walk ratio dropped for the second straight season down to just 6. What a bum, eh? Just a ratio of 6. What's wrong with this guy? I mean, this guy was a control god in his day. He's one of only 6 pitchers ever to throw at least 200 innings in a season with less than 20 walks. But, man, it's been a rough week for pitching, hasn't it there, Peter? Darvish, Stroman, and Lee within a week. Fun start to the season, huh?
It seems to be the name of the game, doesn't it?
You got any of these guys on your teams?
No.
Well, knock on wood.
Managed to avoid that.
Me neither. I feel fortunate that I don't, but I know there's a lot of people out there that are bummed. Now, it is March, as we said, so spring training is in the air. So why don't we talk about some box scores today, and maybe offer some notes from what's going on in the bigs today. Speaking of the Phillies, of course, you were checking out the Phillies-Detroit game today. What transpired there, Peter?
Well, I wrote down some notes, so I'll tell you the ones that's jumped out at me. Odubel Herrera, who we talked about, or who we mentioned, I guess, was picked off first base. First base. This game wasn't on TV, so I didn't watch it, but he was picked off, which is not a good thing for a speedy guy who's going to rely on his legs to be a Rule 5 guy who sticks. But it's a weak enough team, and he's fast enough and talented and hitting enough that he has a good chance of sticking in that outfield, which gives him very real fantasy value, because even if he doesn't play every day, the steals will come in pinch running situations, and he may have enough bat to actually even help, at least with the batting average type of thing. Cody Ash started today at third base. That's the expected plan in April, and Michael Franco will head out to AAA again for at least a little while, and there's a lot of moving parts there. They're talking about maybe Ryan Howard will move someplace, although they're also talking about Ryan Howard playing every day, both of which just seem like unlikely and not such smart things. I saw a quote today from Freddie Galvis, who's the team's starting shortstop, that he's going to try not to fill Jimmy Rollins' shoes as an offensive force, which is good for him.
That's a fine choice.
That's very realistic. But the funny thing I have to say about Freddie Galvis is that I was in Florida last year and for spring training, and I saw the Phillies in Port Charlotte, and the the stands were full of Phillies fans, and when Freddie Galvis came out to play, they all went crazy. They love Freddie Galvis. He's a hot rod. He's a flashy kind of full energy player, and if he can handle shortstop, he's going to get a lot of love. If even if he's not a big offensive producer, and he might be a little bit of a plus if you can get him in the end game as a starter. He might put up some numbers that are helpful. He's not going to be Jimmy Rollins, of course, but that didn't need to be said. And Jerome Williams was the starter today for the Phillies. He's a guy I've always liked, but he's always been up and down, inconsistent.
Mostly down. Yeah.
Mostly down, but when he gets into a groove, as he did for part of the time last summer, he's not. He looks like he should be somebody who can step it up and become a solid rotation guy, which is, of course, that's what the Phillies are expecting him to be, which is also kind of crazy. But
yes.
But so he was in the game. In the Philly-Detroit game, Rajai Davis was the leading off. He's a guy who every year doesn't seem to have a role, where are the at-bats going to come from? He's going to steal bases, but he always goes for $5 or $6, and he always earns $15 to $25 because he actually ends up playing more than expected, and he steals a lot of bases. He's in a similar situation. He's in the same situation this year. The majority of the at-bats are supposed to go to Anthony Goes, but Goes
has been killing it in spring training.
I know he's hitting like 450 or something, but he's
Goes
not
has been on fire.
But it's the first week, so he's not a very good hitter. And anyway, I think if Davis is going cheap, he's a guy to pick up for some cheap speed. Yannis Cespedes left the game with a tight quad. That's something to keep an eye on. He's not supposed to be out for very long. I think they were just being careful. Jason Verlander started the game, pitched 3 scoreless innings. He only struck out one guy at spring training. Who cares? But coming off the year he did, he's somebody to watch closely because he's if he as he transitions to a non-dominant strikeout guy, you have to look at what he actually is doing and how he's doing it. He could conceive a lot of good strikeout pitchers make that transition and become pretty decent pitchers into their 30s, but some don't, and it's we'll have to see with Verlander. Tyler Collins is another guy who's in this game with the Phillies. He's looking like the 5th outfielder right now. He's got a nice power bat. He makes okay contact. He's probably not ever going to be a regular everyday outfielder, but he's the kind of under the radar type of guy who, if he played for a few weeks, might be very helpful, or if you had a hole, you'd like him to be filling it rather than somebody else. He's got the potential to make some contributions. And then the last note I have from that game, Joe Nathan got creamed. Again, it's spring training. Who cares?
Yeah.
Nobody. But Joe Nathan is really, really old. He's coming off a not so good season. They say he's going to be the closer, but I would not be putting up the house on that one.
So what you're saying is invest in Soria.
Well, Soria's not going cheaply, so it's not like
no. But I just mean, if you're looking at the long haul, the whole year, and I mean, even Bruce Rondon could be a factor there too.
I guess so. Soria seems in a much better position than Rondon.
I just think they like Rondon long term, though. So at some point, depending on how things play out with the Detroit, they're going to want to see if he can close.
Well, I'd like to see him
I've got him.
Throw some more strikes.
Yeah.
would be a good indicator. But
he had a pretty good year 2 years ago before what happened last year. He was really starting to come on when he was out of pressure situations. He was on a very nice roll there. I think he was ready to break out in a big way last year, and because the timing would have been perfect with Nathan blowing up until the trade deadline. So Rondon would have been in a great position to secure that role on a long-term basis last year, but injuries had something else in mind for him. So,
yep.
What can you do? Those were great notes. You want to take my game as well, Miami, Minnesota? Those notes were awesome.
I paid no attention to that game because it's on your schedule, so
That's
I have
okay.
no idea.
Well, I mean, it's hard. I'm just saying a hard act to follow. But the Twins did win 7-6 to move above 500 for the spring. But Phil Hughes was not effective. In both his starts this spring, he has not made it through the second inning yet. Of course, control was his big thing last year, 16 walks. He was one of those 6 pitchers I was talking about, less than 20 walks, over 200 innings pitched. But he's issued a walk in each start so far. And he even walked Don Kelly, who's not exactly a feared slugger, on 4 pitches. I mean, in an inning and 2/3, he wound up giving up 3 hits and 4 runs with the 1 walk and 3, and also had a wild pitch, another indicator that his command is not exactly where it was last year. But again, spring training, we're not going to panic. He is the projected opening day starter this year. Set career highs last season in innings pitched, 209 2/3, and strikeouts 186, on his way to earning the Calvin R. Griffith Award as the most valuable Twin. And you may recall he also set a major league record last year for the highest strikeout to walk ratio ever at 11.63, which is mind-blowing. For the Marlins, Jarrett Cozart was the starter here, and he took it on the chin, giving up 4 hits and 3 runs in 2 innings, 2 strikeouts, 1 walk. Things got off to a rocky start right away with Cozart as Brian Dozier led off the first with a homer. Although Cozart was showing a blazing fastball, reaching 96 several times today. But in defense of him, he was working on a changeup all game, which explains his issues. Spring training, once again, pitchers try new pitches. You got to kind of, when you're talking about prospects or veterans coming back from injuries, those are really the only pitchers I'm paying attention to. You know what I'm saying, in spring training?
Yep.
We're talking about guys who have established roles, who are definitely in the rotation or not fighting for a job. We're looking for guys who, it's perfectly acceptable for them just to be toying with pitches. And when you're toying with pitches against major league hitters, sometimes they get slapped around pretty good until you get it right. But Cozart's a guy I'm interested in because, of course, he was 4-4, 2.39 in 10 starts last year. I'm really looking forward to seeing what he can do with 30 starts. For Miami, Jeff Mathis. There's a name you don't hear very often on a fantasy perspective, but he was 1 for 3 with a 3-run homer against Hughes, his first dinger of the spring. He also struck out once. Of course, he's behind Salty and JT Realmuto on the depth charts. I mean, I guess Mathis is going to get the backup job because when they give the job to Realmuto, it'll probably be on an everyday role. Still, the interesting thing here is Mathis had a slash line 73, 289, 386, 87 WRC plus against lefties last year. And that was about 20% better than Saltalamacchia did against lefties. Salty's a switch hitter, but obviously really has a tough time against southpaws. So Mathis does have his uses in the Marlins roster, especially, not from a fan perspective, but definitely in real baseball, because he's a damn good catcher defensively, and he fills in where Salty is weak, which namely against left-handed hitters. For Minnesota, one of their top prospects who's sort of fallen by the wayside in the last couple of years is Eddie Rosario. He's coming back from a drug suspension last year and really did not light it up in the minors, but he's putting on a show this spring. He's 2 for 2 with an RBI today. Right now he's competing with Aaron Hicks and Shane Robinson to win an outfield job. Hicks looks like the favorite for center fielder, but Rosario's trying to unseat him. And in 6 games so far, he's doing his job. 308, 615, a home run, a double, a couple RBIs. He could sneak onto the roster, and he's a guy that, prospect hounds have been watching for a while. But like I said, he really took a bath last year in the wake of the suspension. So,
he was not only suspended, but then he came back and he got hurt. So he missed a good part of the early part of the season. They sent him to Arizona, where I saw him in the Arizona Fall League, and he looked sharp. He lit it up there too. I think he's whether he is actually going to make it as an everyday player or end up as more of a utility guy, that's a little bit up in the air. But he's a definitely a major league talent on some level.
Well, the fact that he can play center field is a real bonus because, I mean, he came up as a second baseman, I believe.
Yes.
And then basically was like second base / outfield. And that's, of course, where you get stuck in that utility role, like you said. But center field, not everyone can play. So if he can hit, and, you know, based on what you said about Arizona and so far this spring, he is opening some eyes. So it's good to see he's at least back on track and back in the picture. Because he looked like he had a promising career about 2-3 years ago and sort of, you know, slid for a couple of years. Nice to see that, you know, he has reemerged. So how about Detroit-Houston? I guess I stuck you with all the Tiger games today.
Yeah, I got both sides of the split game. So not only was Rajai Davis playing in the first game, but Anthony Goes led off in the Houston game, and he's hitting like, I think he's hitting 450 or whatever, but whatever. It's spring training, it's early. He's doing fine, and if they end up in a platoon, I'll be surprised if that holds all season long. But he could end up with a job for a while. He's another fast guy. It just doesn't look to me. But Davis hits lefties really well, and doesn't hit righties all that well, which is obviously a problem. Ghost doesn't hit anybody that well, so I'm not sure he makes a great part.
Bear in mind, though, that Ghost is a special player in center field. Like, will suck it up a little on offense, given his contributions. They won't suck up, you know, 190 average or something. You know what I mean? Like, there's only so much a guy can struggle. But if he hits to his career 234 BA and steals 25 bases, I think they'll be thrilled, given what he can do in center field.
And he may
That's
get
the impression I get.
He may get the chance to do that because Davis really isn't a very good hitter against righties. So that could be an interesting place where there are two part-time guys who are both worth rostering in a major league job. We'll have to see if Ghost can really hit 340, whatever, and make that work. The surprise, I think it was a surprise today. Jose Iglesias got hurt again a couple days ago. He wasn't supposed to come back until tomorrow, but he played today in that game against Houston. He has the potential to be, if he can get past all these leg injuries, he has the potential to be a kind of special shortstop, and it's and he's a little bit forgotten because it's been a long time since he played. James McCann caught the game. It's hard to know how much playing time he's going to get. He seems to be the natural guy to back up Alex Sevilla. Alex Sevilla, who has ongoing back problems and injuries. I've always liked Sevilla as a hitter, but he doesn't appear to be physically able to play every day. If McCann gets the at-bats, he has just enough of an at-bat. He's a defensive catcher, but he does hit well enough to actually have some impact as a second catcher in the AL league. Definitely somebody who might not be on lists who should be. Drew Verhagen started the game, and he's like, you know, they talk about him and Kevin Lobstein in the same sentence, and it's kind of funny because they're both soft tossing contact guys. They don't strike anybody out. They're both sinker ballers. They both have had pretty good minor league careers, and bringing that skill set to the major leagues can work, but it's really hard to tell until they get exposed a little bit and hitters figure them out, whether they're going to get killed every time or only once every 5 or 6 games. And that's the story there. He could be the fifth starter on the Tigers, or it could be Lobstein, I think, is the best alternative. They're both dangerous fantasy picks, but kind of fun guys because they are skill guys. If they're not working their skills, they're getting creamed. Jose Altuve led off for the Astros and was 3 for 3, so there's no news there. The Astros pretty much played their regular lineup. I think it's pretty much all the regulars started the game, and Dan Straley started the game, pitched effectively for 3 innings, but he struck out nobody and he walked nobody, which is actually not unlike his profile. So not a lot of news there either. But he's a guy on that team who could, it's really hard to read that team. They have lots of interesting, talented players who may be major leaguers or may just strike out too much to be, and a couple of tough positions. But also some great players like Altuve, and it's going to be fun to watch them this year and see how they develop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you keep mentioning a lot of my players that I have in my keeper leagues, but each year analysis there is Dan Straley is definitely one that I have who. A lot of these guys are bubble guys on my keeper team this year that I'm very closely watching this spring to just see, what role they're going to have, if any, and, if any of my other guys get injured, like basically figuring out how I'm going to trim my roster down to 25 at the beginning of the season. Because we have a pretty generous roster, like minor league rosters, but once they come up, you've got to obviously jettison someone else. So Straley's a guy who's on my bubble this year. So I'm watching Red Sox and Pirates, and the Red Sox keep on rolling in spring anyhow. Pirates today 5-1. Both David Ortiz and Pablo Sandoval went yard as the Sox moved to 5 games over 500 with their 7th straight win. They are as hot as can be in Florida. Which absolutely jack squad. But it's better than losing, I guess. Net shut out the Sox for 2 innings, but when the lineup got a second look at him, things unraveled a bit for the veteran. He came out in the third with 2 runners on base, and then Ryan Beckman came in, who's basically got almost no experience above Double-A, and promptly served up a 3-run homer to Poppy, and then a solo stand-up, his first with the Red Sox. Pittsburgh has scored only 15 runs in the last 10 games after racking up 8 in its first game. And I'm sure that has a lot of people panicking, but a game means nothing whatsoever. Still interesting to note. For Boston, right-hander Clay Buchholz was the starter. He survived a very rocky first inning where 2 singles, he hit a batter, he had a wild pitch, he had a wild pickoff, and there was a sacrifice fly. But he stuck around long enough to pitch 3 innings, giving up 4 hits and just 1 unearned run with 2 strikeouts, and this ground baller is now 2-0 early on this spring. For Boston, of course, the big night belonged to Ortiz, and the homer was his only hit in 2 at-bats. It was his first of the spring. He also drew a walk. The dinger actually cleared the batter's eye in center field going well over 400 feet, so a no-doubter for Ortiz. For the Pirates, Andrew McCutchen, 1-for-1 with a walk and a sacrifice fly for the only Pirate RBI. Now, he's generally been going second off the boards in most leagues this spring, and certainly today's effort will not change that, obviously. Burnett tossed 2 1/3 hitless innings, all told, but he walked 3 and was charged with 2 of the runs thanks to the Ortiz home run. He wound up striking out 2. Now, here's a guy who was so unhappy to Philly. He declined his play for $12.75 million. He just said no thanks. He could have picked it up and just stayed in Philly for $12.75 million. Instead, he opts to sign with the Pirates, where he was the season before that, for $8.5 million, leaving over $4 million on the table. And that speaks volumes about Philadelphia and his, at least from AJ Burnett's perspective. And he's trying to work more change-ups into his mix this year, because obviously it's been years since he's been able to dominate with his fastball. So Baltimore St. Louis interleague tilt there.
I actually got to watch part of this game, although I didn't tune in until they were into the Scribini time. The main news from the game was that Bud Norris got whacked, for what that's worth. The coolest thing I saw, actually the big news was that Jaime Garcia was just great. He pitched 4 innings, struck out 5. His sinker was working. He was making guys look foolish. I didn't watch the first couple innings, but I did watch his replays of him striking out guys, and he looked really good striking them out.
St. Louis needs more pitching.
He was very effective. If he's a weapon or in the rotation, that is that rotation gets very, very deep, which raises some interesting questions about whether he actually ends up in the rotation and maybe Carlos Martinez goes back to the bullpen, or I don't know. There's a lot of questions there. I don't know how they'll resolve that. It always takes care of itself. We don't have to worry about that. But he was looking like the Jaime Garcia of old, not the guy who's been struggling to stay healthy in recent times. You had something?
Oh, I was just saying how much depth St. Louis has. I mean, and of course, Trevor Rosenthal, in my mind, should still be a starter, not a closer. But that's a whole other kettle of...
Right. Everth Cabrera led off for Baltimore. I think he's the guy who, depending on his legal situation, he could end up in jail for a while. But he's a guy who is not going for very much right now because of the question marks, and he can be an impact shortstop in a hurry if he's able to play, and he's not going to be out all season for sure. I mean, it was a traffic stop drug bust, I believe, and they were working it out legally. I'm not sure that he's going to do time, but any indecision about him, I think it makes him an interesting choice. The guy who finished the game for Baltimore is the prospect Hunter Harvey, who I hadn't seen before. He throws his ball is like lightning. His fastball is like lightning. It was very impressive, and looking forward to seeing more of him in the future. For St. Louis, one of my old favorite sort of Scrubini, this guy is going to hit more than anybody expects, but he never did. Scott Moore was playing third base, and he was 0 for 3 and struck out 3 times, which is probably a better evaluation than my evaluation of him all these many years. Mark Reynolds hit a 3-run home run and got hit by a pitch and came out of the game. I don't think he's hurt, but that's something to take a look at. He's a guy who's going to work on the small side of the platoon with Matt Adams. Those two guys together could be massive. They could put up massive numbers. It's a very good pairing, and each of them will be protected from their weaknesses, which is a good thing for the Cardinals. Stephen Piscotty hit a double in the 8th or 9th inning. That he looks like a solid ball player to me, but he probably doesn't have enough power to play regularly in left field, and that is too bad because he looks like he could be a very nice ball player, but the sort of player who ends up being a fourth outfielder or a starter in San Diego in most years, not this year. And
yes.
And I had one other. What does this say?
Can't read your own writing?
Yeah, no, something about the Cardinals' pitching quality. I think they're going to be okay. That's it from that game. They won, by the way. I don't really pay attention to that, but they won the game. I think 6-2 or something.
All right, sounds good. The final game of the day that we were looking at. I mean, I suppose being spring training, we could look at every single game, but there's only so much time you want to hear us yammering about baseball, I guess. I don't know why. There could be a limit, but at any rate, Toronto-Tampa Bay was a laugher. Tampa Bay winning, going away 10-3. Alex Cobb had his day, but got plenty of support later on. Won easily. He is the projected opening hitter for the Rays, but he failed to make it through the 3rd inning. He was perfect in the 1st, but he touched up for a run in the 2nd, and then 2 more in the 3rd. Wound up going 2 in the 3rd, giving up 5 hits, 3 runs, struck out 4, walked 1, and had a wild pitch. Now, Cobb is only 27, yet he is the oldest member of the Rays rotation, which tells you a lot. But there is nothing un-Ace-like about him, at least in the second half last year. when he had a 1.79 ERA over 14 starts after the All-Star break. It was the fourth lowest ERA in the majors over that stretch. So we know he can do it. Now, this is the first time all spring that the Rays scored more than 5 runs in a game. They got 8 in the 5th inning alone in this one. So the floodgates finally opened for the vaunted Tampa Bay offense, which, of course, has been great for many, many years and will continue to be great this year, he said with sarcasm dripping. Marco Estrada was the recipient of the bitch slapping for the Jays. He lasted 2/3 of an inning and gave up 7 hits and 7 runs and a home run. And, in the wake of Stroman getting hurt, the Jays may actually need Estrada, so that was not a good sign. One good sign, though, for the Jays was that Mark Buehrle did start and looked phenomenal. In 3 1/3, he only gave 2 hits, 4 runs. He struck out 2, did not walk anybody, was really in command before handing it off to the Toronto bullpen, which made a mess of things. Buehrle has allowed only 4 hits over 5 1/3 in his 2 starts, and the 35-year-old Southpaw has yet to walk a batter this spring. Very good news there. For the Jays on the offensive side of things, Dalton Pompey, fine-looking youngster, was 2 for 3 with a run and a double before coming out with shortness of hydration. Jays said it's no big deal. He was going to come out next inning anyway, so obviously this is not a serious issue. And now that Anthony Gose has been traded, center field is Pompey's to lose. For Tampa Bay, former Mariner top prospect Nick Franklin, still trying to emerge as a majors, but is only 24. And he had a huge day, going 2 for 3 with a run and a couple RBIs, did strike out as well. He really struggled in the majors last year, but was slightly better after getting dealt to Tampa Bay. Still, that power speed potential is a good reason to keep an eye on him, for sure.
Yes.
Now, anything else you wanted to talk about this evening, Peter? We're over the 1 hour mark, so we're pretty much.
I had a couple notes here. We kind of talked about Brian Dozier is hitting .625 at this point. That's probably not going to continue. Jared Weaver was the other interesting note from today. Well, one of 2 other interesting notes. He pitched fairly okay for the Angels today, but his fastball was in the low 80s, which is down a few miles an hour from last year when it was around 86. It's early in spring training. You can't, read that as what he's going to do when the camps break, but the deceleration of his fastball is definitely a big story and a reason to keep an eye on him and be careful about expecting him to repeat last year, much less 2 years ago or 3 years ago.
Is this not Jeff Part 2, except it took Weaver about 3 or 4 more years for it all to kind of unravel?
Well, it's funny that it does have that it does weave that same kind of story.
Very good. Very good. Well, obviously, Jared Weaver's period of excellence was longer and more dominant than Jeff's, but the trajectory of them falling out. Now, I mean, is Jared Weaver more than a year or 2 away from being a long reliever?
I don't know how to tell that. What is certainly true is that he's not the same pitcher that he was 2 years ago, and by watching the speed gun, he's gone from like 90 to 98, from 90 to 89 to 88 to 87 to 86. It's not a dramatic drop from year to year, but it's definitely been a wearing down, and with it the strikeouts have fallen. The last year he struggled much more. I'm not saying it's the end. I'm not saying he's a long reliever. I don't know. Part of making these adjustments is part of growing older as a pitcher, where you have to come up with new pitches. You have to come up with new approaches and release points.
There aren't too many like Pedro Martinez's who can pitch at that speed and combat, can combine that with a curveball that's so deadly that he can still get by. You know what I mean? Like it's really rare. Yeah.
So Weaver was never a a velocity guy, but when you lose what you've got, then you have to change other things. And what we know from Jeff Weaver was that he was kind of a head case. He kind of didn't even. I'm not, I shouldn't say he didn't try to do it, but he was kind of goofy about it. He wasn't systematic about it. He wasn't successful with it in making the conversion, and we don't know about Jarrett, but it's he's going to have to go through the same thing, and that's the point where he goes from being, pretty close to an ace to being middle of the pack and without the big gas and maybe with some.
Didn't he have a couple 200-plus strikeout seasons in there? He had some big numbers. And he had one very big year where, for at least half a season, he looked like the best pitcher in baseball, briefly.
Yeah, I think
4 years ago, maybe?
He might have had, 1 year where he struck out more than one per inning. But that's not been his profile for most of his career. It's, 4 years ago. Now I'm looking at it. 4 years ago, but he struck out 198 and 235. So it's the year before that, though, he struck out 233 and 224. And in any case, he's just a guy to keep an eye on. The name says, he's the Angels' ace, but it's but that is probably not. I mean, that wasn't the case last year. And
I would say Garrett Richards has taken over as the team ace once he's healthy, anyhow. And I mean, hell, I might even put the way Matt Shoemaker looked last year ahead of him. We'll see how that plays out. I mean, and C.J. Wilson has the capability of being better than him, but he hasn't shown it so far since moving west, anyhow, which is surprising because you figure, I mean, C.J. Wilson, he did that in Texas, going to pitcher's park, should be awesome, but it hasn't worked out for him. We'll see. Now, you're a New York boy. A-Rod, I was watching the game yesterday, and he launched that puppy. I'm just saying, I'm not a fan. You know how where I stand on A-Rod, but he can still turn around a fastball, apparently. That was against Brandon Workman, an actual major league pitcher. I mean, hitters count 3-1. He was sitting on a fastball, and he got it, and he drilled it. He didn't make a mistake. But, he looks like he may be able to contribute a little bit to the Yankees. And let's face it, the Yankees are desperate for offense after last year, are they not?
Yes. It's a very funny looking team. For a team that spends as much money as they do, it's kind of a desperate, terrible, awful team. But they spend so much money, and they actually have a bunch of talent too. So they might be okay. But A-Rod is old. A-Rod is old, and if he can settle in as the DH and gets a chance to play most of the time, it wouldn't surprise me if he's not a little bit productive as a power guy. But
I still don't see where he's going to get even 400 at-bats from, given the amount of people. You've got to sit Beltran down and have him DH every now and then. You got to have Teixeira DH every now and then. There's guys that just need to take a turn at DH in the Yankees, right? It's just, I don't know. We'll see how it goes.
And it's a team, and they brought in Garrett Jones, who
also is going to take a turn at DH, right? Because Beltran's in right field, so
right. And Jones is a good match for DH, but he's not a good match with A-Rod, particularly at DH. So it's, I mean, A-Rod, is he only going to face lefties? That seems kind of crazy. But
no.
It's a crazy situation. So it may well turn out to be that A-Rod plays against lefties, Jones against righties, and they each sub in when Beltran and some of those other guys need a spell and can DH. It's going to be a managerial hell, I'm sure.
One of the things I was interested in, this was of course in Fort Lauderdale, not in Yankee Stadium, but the fans were cheering him when he came up, and they sure were cheering him as he rounded the bases. Now, is that going to happen in Yankee Stadium? What is the crowd's reaction going to be on opening day when A-Rod comes to the plate?
I've been to Yankee Stadium many times, and I would say the fans hate A-Rod. I've always thought it was unfair that they were blaming him for things. This was before all the really bad stuff. It was just when he was not good at hitting in the clutch,
failures,
and not good at and not good at being like a normal human being, but always being A-Rod. And so Florida is much nicer than New York. It'll surprise me if he gets a warm reaction in the city. But
I'm really interested to see that on opening day. What's going to happen? And if he goes yard on opening day, do those boos turn to cheers? Like
Oh yeah.
I'm just really, really interested to see how that's going to play out. Now, did you see this whole Will Ferrell thing today?
I'm aware of it. I didn't follow the hashtag. I didn't watch any of the video clips. I figured there's going to be some, entertainment to come that will be. But I think it's a fantastic and funny idea, and I hope it was as fun as it sounded like it should be.
Yeah, I'm not in. I haven't seen it all yet, but I mean, basic things where that actually happened in the Cubs Angel game, as the when he was the Angels before he got traded to the Cubs halfway through the game, he was playing center field and he fielded a single cleanly. His footwork looked great, and he fired it into second base to hold the guy to a single. And, he looked like he knew what he was doing, and he got a big standing ovation for it. But he absolutely was completely effective on the play. And then he got traded to the Cubs. He had him pinch hit. Cubs were up 8-3, so it was like whatever. And he struck out on 3 pitches. He took the first 2 called strikes, and then he went down swinging. And that, as far as I know, is the only time he's come to bat in the entire day. It was all about fielding and trying to play every position. So, but the only time he actually seemed to touch the ball, he looked pretty good.
That's great.
Yeah, it's all right. His footwork was solid. He did not look dramatically out of place. So there you go.
And is he older than A-Rod or younger? I think he's probably older, right?
Oh, he's definitely older. Yeah. Let's see. Article here does it say how old he is. No, it doesn't. But I mean, he's got to be in his mid-40s. I'm thinking.
He's actually 48, or he will be 48.
Oh, okay, yeah. I was thinking he's pushing 50. I mean, see, my greatest baseball memory of Will Ferrell is playing the role that he did on Eastbound and Down. Did you ever watch that series?
No.
My God, you have to watch it. As a baseball fan, you will howl. It is absolutely brilliant. It's so freaking funny. I mean, it transcends baseball, but it's very, very funny. And Will Ferrell has a recurring role on that series, and that's just tremendous. Highly recommend that series.
I will check it out.
That's all I got tonight. So now's the time in the evening where I turn it over to you to pimp away. So feel free to pimp.
Well, so the things I've got going, the pattonandco.com, pattonandco.com, is a great spot to come and ask questions about individual players, get in conversations about players and their skills, questions about, fantasy, baseball, everything. It's 10,000 different discussion boards, and Alex Patton and I and an incredible group of guys are there fielding questions and talking about baseball every day.
Including Tim McLeod.
Tim McLeod, exactly. Yep, he's there. The Tout Wars drafts are coming up. We had the Tout Wars mixed draft on Tuesday night, the results of which you can find at toutwars.com. And we have our auctions coming up next weekend, the 21st and 22nd. Feel free to drop in. There'll be a live spreadsheet and a live blog, and we're also on Sirius XM Radio all day on Saturday and Sunday in the morning into the afternoon with the NL, in which I will be drafting. So that's a good place to hang and see what a lot of baseball writers are doing and how they're putting their teams together. And there's always Ask RotoMan, which is blog.askrotoman.com, where I answer questions. I post some stuff. There'll be, if you're a fantasy guide reader, there will be an update of the stats of the projections and the bid prices this weekend. I'm not sure if I'll get it done tomorrow, but it'll definitely be up this weekend. And you can look on the corrections and updates page, which is in the top menu bar, for the link to that, which will have a little password thing. If you own the magazine, you can get access to that stuff. And this is just a great fun time. The only thing I wish is that I could spend it all in Florida or Arizona, but fortunately there's TV.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, wow, that was an excellent pimping session, by the way. Last time I asked you, you kind of stammered and stammered a little bit to pull it out of you. You were prepared tonight. AskRotoMan.com, the interesting thing when you mentioned that, I remember when my site first started way back when, you wrote an article about a very complimentary article. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Many years ago. And I was thinking about that tonight when I said that we're almost at 4,050 articles on the site now. And I'm just thinking, holy shit. I mean, yikes. That's a lot of freaking content. A lot of content. I mean,
I remember when you said you were doing this, and I thought, most people do it for a year or two, and then run out of gas. But you've made it work. Yeah.
Well, I'm hardcore. I mean, I've made it work to the detriment of my ability to make a living, I might add. Because every hour I spend working on RotoRob is an hour that I should be, looking for real work and making a living and paying my rent and, stuff like that. So I had to institute a rule a couple of years ago where it's like, okay, 9 to 5, I'm actually working, and then fine, let's say, I can work on RotoRob,
When you're not playing hockey.
Or baseball, or watching baseball or hockey or basketball or football or having some kind of social life or whatever. Yeah, exactly. In my spare time. And I stopped the rule that I have to post every day because basically I had a run of about 4 or 5 years where I had at least one article every single day. And I thought, okay, who am I impressing? You know what I mean? Like, if I miss a day, is the world going to stop spinning on its axis, really? Like, honestly?
So far not.
So, yeah. But, I mean, over 4,000 articles. So, that's a shitload of content. I was thinking about in terms of word count, it's a lot.
Yeah, you need a mathematician for that. Well, you've
exactly.
You've worked with a lot of really good writers, people I've been glad to know, and whose work I respect too, as well as yours. So it's good to see you keeping it up.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I mean, the funny thing is, the site is actually starting to make money, which has been really nice. Like, I must have hit some kind of critical. It's actually starting to make money. I must have hit some kind of critical mass there.
That's
where good. Advertising really started spiking, and it was like, wow. So it's definitely gratifying from that perspective to work that hard. I mean, I don't really care because to me it was just a hobby. But if I could have turned it into my business, I absolutely would. Like, if I could just sit and do nothing but blog all day, I would totally do it and make a living on it. But anyhow. Sorry, we ran over a little bit, but that's okay. It was great talking to you, Peter. A fantastic show, and I appreciate all the insight there. That was great.
Thanks for having me, Rob. We'll do it again sometime later.
Yeah, in the season. Now we're going to be off for a few weeks for March Madness. So I guess down for about 2 or 3 weeks watching basketball. So if you need me, I will be in front of the TV with a big bowl of cheese doodles. And in the meantime, I'm going to close the show with some Sean Mulrain, Open Door, and have yourself a great evening.
Take care, man. Bye-bye.